Hi, this is Dr. Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. When we look at our society as a whole, and one of the things that has been alarming recently is there's been a lot of, from the liberal left, there's been a lot of people trying to shut down people that disagree with them. You know, the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States protects our right to free speech. And you're allowed to say whatever you want to say as long as you don't incite violence or promote, someone trying to hurt someone, or damage a property or rioting or something along those lines. And as long as you don't engage in what's known as defamation, or if I make a statement, I can give my opinion about somebody. I can say, I think that this person is a blah, 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 but I can't give a false statement. Like I can't say, I know that this person committed a crime, or this person is a pedophile, or this person is a whatever, without proof. That's defamation. That can fall under a legal category. But other than that, I can say whatever I want about a person or to a person, as long as I'm not inciting violence and as long as I'm not trying to mischaracterize that person in a way that could make me legally liable. But with that being said, we see recently on college campuses when conservatives go to speak, like at Berkeley and different places like that, there's rioting, they shut people down. It's this a wave of political correctness that has taken over our modern culture. And, many people might think that it's a natural evolution that a person got there by, hey, this is how we evolve as a society. But I want to point out to you that that this political correct atmosphere that we live in is not something that just happened naturally, organically. It's something that is contrived. It's something that is controlled and manipulated. When you understand the powers that be, the ruling elite, that they have been working on this for some time. As a pastor, a lot of times people ask me, why do I engage in certain thought processes, or why do I engage in certain conversations that traditionally have been deemed or thought of as not being something that a Christian or a pastor or someone who's in the Bible would engage in. But what I'd like for you to understand is that God is the creator of heavens and the earth, the heavens and the earth. He's the creator of everything, and everything that we face here in this time, in this season, in our culture, is nothing new. It's everything repeats itself. There's cycles to everything. There's cycles to life and death. There's cycles to the seasons. Everything operates in cycles. When you look at God, when you look at humanity. There's cycles. So everything, the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. So whether it's a certain philosophy, whether it's a certain strategy that's being employed, none of this stuff is new. The only thing that may be new is when they come out with a new iPhone, maybe that particular piece of technology didn't exist before, but everything else, every ideology, every thought, everything that people, come up with is something that is recycled. It might be new to you, but it's not new stuff. So I want to talk a little bit about this. There was a thing called the Enlightenment period, and I believe it's the 18th century, primarily a period in Europe called the Enlightenment period. And, a lot of modern philosophy came from that. The study of modern psychology, different things like that came from what's known as the Enlightenment period. And during the Enlightenment period, you had these thought elites, if you will. So the people that were high up in culture or music or politics or industry, they all, were kind of participating in this. And in Europe, they had a lot of monarchies. So a lot of these rulers, a lot of these kingdoms in Europe and nations were actually ruled by a certain royal family, if you will, and it was passed down through the bloodlines. So it didn't necessarily mean that that person was the best leader or anything of that nature. It just meant that by heritage, they would take over the throne. So if the king died, then usually his son would take over, or somebody who he chose. And so this group of people that really was stirred up during this time, they began to see how oppressive that can be at times. And it can be. If you have a monarch, a person that has unaccountability, they have no one who puts them in. Our system is supposed to be based on, it's a constitutional representative republic in which we vote. We have a voting process. So there's a certain level of accountability. When you have a free press and free speech, then it holds people accountable because, you know, we're supposed to, and this is how it's supposed to happen. It doesn't work that way a lot of times, you know, but we're supposed to have a free press and free speech. And so the press, when they really practice what's real journalism, they're supposed to just report information to us and report truth and facts. You know, our modern, you know, media is very little journalism goes on either side, whether you're left or right, you know, on the political scale. Very little true journalism goes on. It's a lot of editorializing, and that's not what journalism is supposed to be. A journalist is not supposed to give you their opinion about how they feel about a person or idea. They're supposed to simply report on you know, what that person says. You know, but that's not how it happens. 90% of the media currently is left-leaning, or at least they support left-leaning. And when you understand that the mainstream corporate media is actually owned by the ruling elite, by proxy, they're actually promoting the agenda of the ruling elite. So anyway, you had this Enlightenment period. They began to study psychology and how the human brain works. There was a population explosion by the onset of the industrial age, the industrial revolution. You know, when life expectancies began to be extended, and the population began to boom. And so these people who would consider themselves as the elite, a class of people, the aristocracy, if you will, they kind of felt like that they were in a different category from the rest of the people, the common folk. And so they began to practice different strategies and philosophies that not only they wanted to limit the population of the world, but also control those who weren't part of the ruling elite class. And, you know, all the stuff I'm sharing is part of their you know, what they've written about and they've talked about and they've lectured about. And again, this philosophy is not a new philosophy. It's a philosophy, you know, if you read Genesis 3 in the Bible, the serpent had come to Adam and Eve, and he practiced a couple of philosophies, and I'm going to tell you about those philosophies. They were deceptive philosophies that were meant to separate people from the knowledge of God, and for us as human beings not to know our true identity and our true purpose, but to replace the true identity and the true purpose of humanity as given by the Creator by a different philosophy, this Luciferian philosophy. Because Lucifer is another name for the serpent or the devil or Satan. And, you know, these people who are ruling elite class people who are you know, the global elite, if you will, they practice a form of Luciferianism. Because the name Lucifer in Hebrew just means light bringer, light bearer. So they believe that Lucifer is the one who enlightens them. And it's because of this secret knowledge or their gifts or their talents or their abilities, it actually makes them greater than the rest of the class of people. And they've been practicing this for some time. So anyway, you have this ruling elite class of people that comes through enlightenment, through philosophy, through music, through the arts, and different things like that. And they begin to form various groups, secret societies, and you know, you heard about the Illuminati that was formed in 1776, May 1st, by Adam Weishaupt. And there were a lot of people that practiced the same type of philosophy, and they began to kind of get together to say, hey, you know, we got to do something about the rest of the people, because, you know, the common folk that don't, you know, they don't have the talents or the gifts or the value that we have as human beings. Then we need to reduce the population, and we need to control those who are around. They consider humanity as a whole as human cattle, and so human cattle that can be used to their benefit. But of course, most of this stuff has to be secret. They can't tell everybody how they feel about them, and so they began to package these deceptions in certain ways as to get them accepted in the you know, by the you know, by the populace, while kind of masking their intentions. So there was a school that the late 19th and early 20th century, they formalized this school. Was called the Frankfurt School, right, in Germany. So Germany is like the core or the foundation or like the birthplace of what is known as the modern Illuminati, or the modern ruling class of people. And so they don't just, all of them don't stay in Germany. And I'm going to talk about how they migrated out of Germany for the most part. But anyway, it begins in Germany. So the Frankfurt School refers to a collection of scholars known for developing critical theory and popularizing the dialectical method of learning by interrogating society's contradictions, and most closely associated with the works of Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Erich Fromm, and Herbert Marcuse. If you get a chance, you can look up these people. These are well-known, well-documented people. They have a lot of books that they've written, a lot of lectures that were done on them, a lot of colleges and universities in their philosophical department will talk about these people. They're held in very high regard because of the liberal nature of our modern educational system. It's not a school. Frankfurt School is not a school in a physical sense, but rather a school of thought associated with some scholars at the Institute for Social Research at the University of Frankfurt in Germany. Now, you got to realize that when you're talking about the Institute for Social Research, they practice what was called social engineering. And so whether it's modern philosophy and Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung and some of these other psychologists, they began to study how the human brain works as a way to kind of control and manipulate the society as a whole. And so modern psychology is actually based on that. The Institute was founded by Marxist scholar Karl Grunberg in 1923 and initially financed by another Marxist scholar, Felix Weil. However, the Frankfurt School is known for a particular brand of culturally focused neo-Marxist theory, a rethinking of classical Marxism to update into their social historic period, which proved seminal for the fields of sociology, cultural studies, and media studies. So, if you're familiar with Karl Marx, and you hear me say this a lot, Karl Marx and Engels, Marxism, which made way for communism and then ultimately socialism, is the form of government that the ruling elite or the Illuminati use. That's the philosophy behind their governmental system that makes way for a new world order. And so the philosophies of Marx and these other philosophers, because of how they thought about themselves, and they basically came up with a way not only to consolidate, all the powers in the world, the political powers of the world, by promoting their ideology, but they were simply replacing the power structure that was in place. So you have, monarchs and kingdoms and rulers and all these other people that were in charge. So they came up with a way to overthrow their power structure, consolidate governments in the world, but by getting the people to agree with it, to go along with it. One of the things that in the Tavistock Institute, which is an offshoot of the Frankfurt School, based on the same philosophy, is they were coming up with a revolution without tears. So if you understand like the communist revolution and, in China and Russia and all these other places that had revolutions, there was a lot of bloodshed. So they began to perfect their strategy in order to overthrow the power structure, the revolution without tears, which means that they were going to use psychological warfare in order to convince the people to revolt and to overthrow the power structure, but it would be a bloodless coup, if you will. So in 1930, Max Horkheimer became the director of the Institute and recruited many of those who came to be known collectively as the Frankfurt School. And like I said, Karl Marx is one of the foundation, way of thinking that most of these people held to. And so, if you understand that Marxism, that it's supposed to be like a revolutionary, it's the workers unite is one of the clarion calls of that. But in essence, they weren't really empowering the workers or the common folk. They were manipulating them and getting them to give up power to them. Because if you know communism and socialism, every time they manifest themselves fully, it's an even more oppressive form of government than any other government. And, one of the things, I wrote a book called The Ministry of Reconciliation. And if you get a chance to read it, The Ministry of Reconciliation, I kind of break down the philosophy behind what we see here. And one of the things that is very evident is that, they use things, the Marxists use things like racism, sexism, and all these other isms as a way to control and manipulate the masses. The the system that destroyed the most lives or took the most lives in the 20th century is a thing called democide. And what democide is, death by government. So more people, over hundreds of millions of people died in the 20th century through democide. And so you had like Pol Pot, you had Mao Zedong, you had the various dictators in Europe that were all part of the Marxist theology or Marxist ideology, if you will. They kill more people than any other system. So even racism, people get mad, especially black people, about the Ku Klux Klan, but the actual Marxist ideology has killed more people than anybody. Social Darwinism, through Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, which is an offshoot of these same philosophies, killed way more people than the KKK. As a matter of fact, every week, abortion clinics kill more black people than the Ku Klux Klan killed in 150 years. I'm going to say that again. Every single week in America, legally, more black babies die on abortion tables than the Ku Klux Klan killed blacks in 150 years. And when you understand that Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist, she came from the same school of thought as Karl Marx and Friedrich Nietzsche and all of these other people that we're going to talk about. But so anyway, when you understand the actual strategy and their philosophy, that's why I'm doing this, because that way people can kind of go back to the core, to the root. If you don't understand the root and the foundation of an ideology, then you can never fully understand it, and you will fall victim to some of the strategies. So some of the names I'll just throw out here: Antonio Gramsci, Theory of Cultural Hegemony. You had Friedrich Pollock, Otto Kirchenheimer, Leo Lowenthal, Franz Leopold Neumann, Walter Benjamin, and some of these other names. You don't have to memorize them. I'm just giving you some names in case you wanted to do the research. One of the core concerns of the scholars of the Frankfurt School, especially Horkheimer, Adorno, and Benjamin, and Marcuse, was the rise of what Horkheimer and Adorno initially called mass culture. In Dialectic of Enlightenment, he wrote, mass culture. This phrase refers to the way technological developments and newly allowed for the distribution of cultural products like music, film, and art on a mass scale, reaching all who were connected by the technology in society. And so think about this. This was back in the days, and this was the early part of the 20th century. This is way before you had iPhones and YouTube and all that other stuff. So when you understand that they were concerned there, so basically what they did is they understood the power of the media and these different mediums like music and film and art, and so they knew that they had to take control of those in order to promote their agendas. So whether it's the music industry, whether it's Hollywood, or whether it's these other higher education or even an educational school system, which our current educational school system is based on the Prussian model that was developed in that same area. They took control of all these various institutions in order to promote their ideology and to get these ideologies accepted by the masses. And so again, when you understand that they are Luciferian in nature, it makes sense as to why Jesus calls Satan the god of this world, because this world system that's based on these various institutions that we're talking about is under the authority of Lucifer. The New World Order, the head of the New World Order, as Albert Pike, one of the framers of the Illuminati, said, is Lucifer, and they know that. And so all these things are in direct opposition to God's word and God's law and the Creator's desire for humanity. And so they are fighting a war so one of the first things that they do, that's why every communist regime or socialistic government or things of that nature, one of the first things they do is they remove God from the mix. They shut the churches down and burn the Bibles, or they have a church state environment. So in church state, it means that the state, which is run by these Luciferians, actually are the ones who are in charge of the church. And so they tell the church what to do. And so a lot of our founding fathers recognized that, which is why, along with the freedom of speech, our First Amendment was freedom of religion. Not freedom from religion, but freedom of religion, because They didn't want the state being able to dictate to the church what to do, because they understood over the time that this is one of the ways that the enemy, basically neutralizes the church by taking over the church and telling the church what they can preach and what they can't preach. The liberal left in America, they're very much anti-church, anti-God, and they want to remove God from. So even when those leaders who are in the liberal left who say that they're Christians, but they still uphold non-Christian principles, non-Christian values, and they're the ones that really push separation of church and state, because they don't want the church influencing the governmental system. And so they have us convinced as men and women of God that there should be a separation between your religion and your politics. And religion and politics, your philosophy, religion should be where your morals and your values and your worldview is based on. So if your worldview is based on your faith in your higher power, your creator, then there can be no separation. You can't separate your worldview from how you view politics or people, and those type of things. So anyway, the devil is really good at convincing and twisting things around. So let's go a little bit further. So the political context of pre-World War II in Germany at the time, Horkheimer chose to move the Institute for the safety of its members. And so they first moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and in 1933, and then to New York in 1935, where they affiliated with Columbia University. Later, after the war, the Institute was reestablished in Frankfurt in 1953. Later, theorists affiliated the schools include Jürgen Habermas and Axel Honneth, among others. So they came up with this thing, Frankfurt School, these philosophers, these ruling elite class people who were Luciferian in nature. They came up with a thing called critical theory, because they understood that in order for them to push the New World Order, the three things that were the greatest obstacle to their New World Order, the three things was the Western culture, Christianity, and the family. And so all those three things should be interconnected and intertwined, but they're not always necessary, which is why I laid them out separately. So you had Western culture, you had Christianity, and you had the family structure. So those are three of the things that were the biggest obstacle for them to push their New World Order. So they attacked all three of them, and they came up with what is known as critical theory. So critical theory emerged out of Marxist tradition, was developed by a group of sociologists at the Unity of Frankfurt, also the Frankfurt School. So critical theory, basically, it's about tearing down, not building up. So critical theory, they attack all the basic institutions of the Western culture and Christianity, and they attacked each and every one of them. But their attack was not meant to build anything, but to tear down the current structure so that they could re-implement their philosophies, their Marxist ideologies, as a way to control the masses. So when you hear critical theory, like for instance, a lot of these ism words, that's part of critical theory. Political correctness is part of critical theory. So what do I mean by that? So what they do is they want to attack the family structure. So if a person believes in like a traditional male and female gender roles, they call you a sexist or a misogynist. If you believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman, they call you a homophobe. If you are pro-life and you believe that abortion is something that is morally evil, which a lot of people do, and they believe it's a wrong, it's something that shouldn't be done legally in America. If you believe that, they say you're trying to violate a woman's right to choose. They even go so far as to break down the family, because you got to realize that our current system, especially with the Prussian educational model, they believe that your children actually belong to the state and not to the parents. And so they even try to teach morality and take the teaching of morality away from the parents and give it to the state. That's why if children and youth come in, if someone accuses you of abusing your child or something, if children and the youth believe it's true, they don't have to even get a warrant. They can just come in and take your children from you, because they believe, our current system, they believe that children belong to the state and not to the parents. And so they have to remove the Judeo-Christian foundational teachings of the family. They have to remove and replace it with an alternate view and it's done to control the masses. Um, so critical theory is one of the things that you use. They criticize the major roles of Judeo-Christian ideology that have been traditional for a long time. You know, they say that the rules like sexuality is repressive. And so you had you had Albert Kinsey, you had the sexual revolution, the free love movement. You had all those things that were actually orchestrated by the offshoot of the Frankfurt School. And you guys are probably familiar with the organization known as the CIA. So the CIA, the foundation of the principles of the CIA is based in the Frankfurt School and the Tavistock Institute, but mainly the Frankfurt School. And it's all based on the occult. It's based on Luciferianism, and they're occultists. And so even Sigmund Freud, most of his psychological theories were based on, all of them centered around sex. Because one of the things that we see in the Bible is what the enemy does in order to advance his kingdom or his demonic activity is always centered around some kind of sexual perversion. Which is why Leviticus 18, you hear me mention Leviticus 18. Leviticus 18 is one of the thoroughest lists of all the abominable practices that the devil, the Lucifer, wants to implement. And all of them directly go against God's law and his commandments. Because that's how Lucifer advances his kingdom. Which is why critical theory attacks all of those institutions like abstinence until marriage, like monogamy and only having sex with your wife and not with a whole bunch of people, and all these type of philosophies that come. They attack all of them. So political correctness is part of critical theory. So if you say anything negative about any of these protected institutions, and just to let you know that white males are the target of this, and they do that as part of what's known as the Hegelian dialectic, in order for them to replace the power structure that's in place. It's not because they care about minorities or all various groups. Identity politics that we see is one of the things, because what they do in order to promote their ideologies, they separate people into classes. And so they tell black people, all black people should think the same, all women should think the same, all gay people should think the same. You know, and when they do that as a way of dividing and conquering. And so then they can implement what's known as identity politics. So they can say, you know, if like this whole thing with Kanye West, like you're Kanye, how can you not be a liberal Democrat? And how can you go speak to President Trump? You must be a sellout or a coon or Uncle Tom. So what the suggestion is that black people all have to have the exact same political views. And if not, then you've sold out or you've betrayed your race. But that's not how it's supposed to work. Different people have different ideologies, even within the same group of people. But of course, identity politics is one of the strategies that they use in order to consolidate, to make it easier to control and to manipulate. Another thing is called repressive tolerance. So in 1965, this gentleman, Herbert Marcuse, that I mentioned earlier, he came up with this concept of repressive tolerance. He created this thing called the Franklin School of Political Theorists, and he argued that under the conditions of advanced industrial capitalism, the only hope for realizing the original objectives of liberalists, so the powers that be, the New World Order people, they admit that liberalism is one of their primary tactics politically in order to push their agenda. They said the only hope for realizing the original objectives of liberalists, or pure toleration, as articulated by British philosopher John Stuart Mill, freeing the mind to rationally pursue the truth was to practice a deliberately selective, liberating tolerance that both targeted and enacted the repression alluded to in the essay's paradoxical title. This liberating tolerance would involve the withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly from groups and movements on the right, and aggressively partisan promotion of speech groups and progressive movements on the left. Marcuse professed to share liberalism's beliefs in human rationality and objective truth, and commitment to its core mechanisms, including toleration. So repressive tolerance that was founded, this ideology that was kind of perfected in 1965, is they only believed in tolerance for the left. They didn't believe in liberals. You can be tolerant of any liberal ideology, but you had to be intolerant of conservative right ideology, which is what you see on college campuses. That's why I mentioned, like at Berkeley and these other places, a liberal can go and say anything, and you have to be tolerant and open to all ideas. But if you go back to some of the foundational principles, then they have a right to be intolerant to those ideas. So if you say that marriage should only be between a man and a woman, and that you should abstain from sex until you're married, they're intolerant of that idea. They'll say you're narrow-minded and you got to evolve and go beyond that. If you say that a person could identify with whatever gender they want to, no matter what, if you say no, that you should be, you should go in the bathroom, your biological sex is connected to, they'll say you're a transphobe and you're intolerant, and they shut you down. That's part of this strategy known as repressive tolerance that they perfected. Herbert Marcuse. And Herbert Marcuse, like I said, he was also a follower of Karl Marx, and his writings reflected a discontent in the modern society and technology and their destructive influences. So what they were saying is, in their day and age, when they call these technology, that they call is the various forms of media, so music, arts, movies, and all that other stuff, writings, they say it all promoted the traditional values, and they said that was destructive. And really what they were saying is it was destructive to their goals, because it solidified some of the foundational ideologies that Judeo-Christian belief system. His application of the theories of Sigmund Freud to the character of contemporary society and politics was the subject of much research, scholarly and otherwise. He was considered by some to be a philosopher of the sexual revolution. So again, Marcuse, when you talk about, they try to say that the definition of sexuality, based on what the Bible tells you, is repressive. And Luciferians, they say that as well too. And what Luciferians say is that that's who makes people feel bad. It's when you tell people, you oppress them and tell them not to do whatever they want to do or whatever they want to say, then they say that you are the ones that are making people feel bad. That's what the Satanists say. Satanists say that it's when you tell people they can't do whatever they want to do, you're the problem. You're the ones that cause people to be depressed and all that other stuff. So you have to let people do, which is Aleister Crowley, and you've heard me talk about him in the past. Aleister Crowley's philosophy, the law of Thelema, or the law of the will, is do whatever you want to do, is the whole of the law. And all these things are Luciferian and demonic, and they go back to Genesis 3, as I mentioned earlier. Now Marcuse, his intellectual heritage was based on a democratic socialist philosophy. And when you talk about democratic and socialist, there's a thing called a Fabian socialist. President Obama was openly a Fabian socialist. There's a politician in New York, a young lady, Hispanic young lady, who she's what they call a democratic socialist. Bernie Sanders, the same thing. These are all philosophies that originate from this, Luciferian New World Order philosophy, and what they believe is you can have a socialist, socialism can exist within a democratic society, but their definition of democracy is that they believe that everybody should vote, but they do that under the belief that they can control the masses using music, arts, and media, and all those other things. So they're open to democracies because if they can control the media and the narrative, then they can also sway public opinion, so they can get anything implemented. So that's the core of their philosophy. So when you understand that, and you see it coming to pass, and so anyway, you have one of the people that Marcuse followed was a guy by the name of G.W.F. Hegel, and you might hear me talk about Hegel often because there's this thing called the Hegelian dialectic that he came up with. Again, this is all a cult. This is all about twisting and distorting words and all these other things. Karl Marx and Hegel, combined with the psychoanalytic theories of Sigmund Freud. These are all the philosophies. So Hegel, or Hegelian dialectic, dialectic is a thing that originated from the Greek society, and they sat around and they had discussions, or they debated philosophical thought. But what Hegel and these other people believe is that in order for them to push in a linear direction their ideology, you can control both sides of the argument in a way that pushes the society as a whole to an anticipated conclusion. So they already have the goal in mind, and they what they do is they frame both sides of the argument in order to push it forward. So the whole Republican Democratic paradigm that we have in America, that's part of the Hegelian dialectic, because ultimately they look to control people on both sides of the aisle in order to push their agenda forward. That's the Hegelian dialectic. That's what you see now. And so you have to be careful when the Republicans and the Democrats are all agreeing to fight against someone like President Trump, because he's an anti-globalist. He's not a saint by any stretch of the imagination. He's very crude, but he's directly attacking a lot of the philosophies and ideologies that they have, like political correctness. So he's really damaging political correctness, which is a good thing, because when you understand political correctness is one of the tools of these people, like from the Frankfurt School. Dialectic is a term used as a method of philosophical argument that involves some sort of contradictory process between opposing sides. And so you have to have both sides of the argument. Hegel comes in and he uses both sides of the argument in the Hegelian dialectic in order to push things forward. This originated from the Greeks and Plato and these type of people. So anyway, I wanted to share that, and I have a lot more to share with you, but I'm going to bring this to a close now. But I wanted to give you a basis for some of the modern ideologies and how the community is going in a certain direction. I wanted to bring that to the surface so you can understand a little bit more clearly the things that you see. Don't be confused, because most of this stuff is well orchestrated. When you see people going to college campuses and getting shut down because they have opposing viewpoints to other people, that's a part of their strategy. That's part of Marcuse's repressive tolerance, they call it. So they only tolerate ideas that line up with theirs, and they are intolerant of ideas that go against what they believe. And their position is the reason they have to fight against certain ideas. They try to say because it victimizes people, but ultimately it's not. It's to shut down the other side of the argument. And again, a lot of our founding fathers, they came out of this situation in Europe where these ideologies were very prevalent, which is why a lot of them, they voted for things like the First Amendment, because they understood that they understood how important faith was in order to keep people from being controlled. And like I always say, one of the things that really hindered the Roman Empire, because what they did in the Roman Empire when they made Christianity the religion of the state, is they twisted and distorted Christianity. They brought in the paganism, but the one thing that they did was they understood that a person that truly has a faith in Jesus Christ through the Bible and has the Spirit of God inside of them, they can't be controlled by even threatening them with death or lying to them, because when you have the Spirit of God, your main person you're loyal to, obviously, is Jesus. So anyway, this has been Dr. Joe Green. Peace and blessings to you. Until next time, I love you. Follow the 2019 movement. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will talk to you soon. Shalom. Shalom.